Dancing with Recovery, How to Make Resilience, Second Nature. Have you ever watched someone dance so effortlessly that it seems like they were born moving that way? That fluid grace, that natural rhythm, it looks like magic. But dancers will tell you that magic is actually the result of thousands of hours of practice, countless falls, and the willingness to get back up again and again until recovery becomes second nature. I recently had the profound privilege of interviewing Kimberly Therese, a visionary who has transformed how we think about resilience, particularly for high achieving Black women. Kimberly isn't just another self help guru, she's a revolutionary architect of sustainable well being who has helped countless women reclaim their power through the radical act of intentional recovery. Her insights didn't just change my perspective, they fundamentally altered the way I move through the world. Today, I want to share what I learned from Kimberly about making recovery not just a response to crisis, but a natural, rhythmic part of our daily lives. Kimberly describes life's challenges as a dance, one where knowing your missteps is just as important as mastering your moves. Recovery isn't something you do after you fall, she told me, her voice carrying the weight of hard won wisdom. It's something you practice until it becomes as natural as breathing. This hit me hard. How many of us treat recovery as an emergency response rather than a daily practice? We push and push until we break, then scramble to put ourselves back together before pushing again. It's exhausting, it's unsustainable, and according to Kimberly, it's unnecessary. Think about it. When a professional dancer performs, they don't just hope they won't stumble. They have practiced recovery moves so thoroughly that even if they do lose balance, the audience might never notice. Their recovery is seamless, integrated, almost beautiful in itself. What if we approach life's challenges the same way? Let me tell you about a remarkable collective of Black women entrepreneurs who completely redefined what success meant to them. These women had been operating under the crushing weight of traditional grind culture, the belief that constant hustle and sacrifice were the only paths to achievement. They faced systemic barriers in funding, encountered workplace discrimination, and battled internalized narratives about their own worthiness. One woman in this group, Janelle, had built a six-figure business, but found herself in the hospital with stress induced health problems at just 32 years old. I was killing myself to prove I belonged in rooms that weren't even designed for me, she told Kimberly during a workshop. And for what? To impress people who still weren't going to give me equal access to opportunities? But something remarkable happened when these women granted themselves permission to prioritize well being over hustle. They began building networks centered on mutual support rather than competition. They created innovative business models that put people before profit margins. They launched mentorship programs specifically designed to empower other Black women entrepreneurs. The result? Their businesses thrived, not despite their focus on well being, but because of it. They inspired industry wide conversations about mental health in entrepreneurship and increased representation of Black women led businesses receiving funding. Janelle's company actually grew by 40% the year she implemented structured rest periods and collaborative leadership models. This wasn't just a nice story about self care. This was a radical reimagining of what success could look like when recovery isn't just an afterthought, but built into the foundation of how we work and live. But I can hear some of you thinking, that sounds great for entrepreneurs who can set their own rules. What about those of us working within systems we didn't create and can't easily change? Kimberly addressed this too through another powerful example. She spoke about Suzette, who inspired an entire episode exploring how emotional boundaries empower Black women navigating professional spaces. Suzette was a senior manager at a Fortune 500 company where she was the only Black woman at her level. For years, she'd been the go to person for everything from crisis management to mentoring junior staff to educating colleagues on diversity issues, all on top of her actual job responsibilities. I was everyone's emotional support human, Suzette explained. I'd come home completely drained with nothing left for myself or my family. Suzette and her colleagues faced the challenge of maintaining authenticity in toxic work environments without burning out or compromising their self worth. Their solution wasn't to work harder or to simply endure. Instead, they focused on setting clear emotional boundaries, prioritizing self care even between meetings, and advocating for respectful treatment at work. For Suzette, this meant creating what she called boundary scripts, prepared responses for common situations that drained her energy. When asked to take on yet another diversity committee, while white colleagues weren't asked to participate, she began saying, I appreciate your thinking of me, but my bandwidth is currently allocated to priorities that align with my professional development goals. I'd be happy to suggest some other approaches to this initiative. Many of these women had histories of feeling pressured into the strong Black woman stereotype, always available to others, but rarely supported themselves. By leading workshops on boundary setting within organizations serving predominantly Black professionals, Suzette empowered others to reclaim agency over their professional lives while nurturing personal well being. The most striking part, after 6 months of consistent boundary practice, Suzette was not only happier and healthier, she was also respected more at work and ultimately promoted. People value what you teach them to value, she reflected. When I started valuing my energy and time, surprisingly, others followed suit. Both these examples illuminate something profound about Kimberly's philosophy. Recovery isn't just about bouncing back from hardship, it's about creating conditions where we can thrive despite inevitable challenges. So, how do we make recovery second nature in our own lives? Kimberly offers three powerful insights. First, recovery requires practice. Just like a dancer rehearses the same movements until they become muscle memory, we need to repeatedly engage in self awareness and self care until they become automatic responses. This might mean setting a timer to take 3 deep breaths before responding to a triggering email, or scheduling non negotiable recovery time in your calendar and defending it as fiercely as you would an important meeting. Second, we must embrace our weaknesses. Dancers improve by identifying where they stumble, not by pretending they never fall. Similarly, personal growth comes from acknowledging vulnerabilities rather than hiding them. When we know our triggers, our patterns, our tender spots, we can develop specific strategies to protect and strengthen them. And third, we must learn to move with life's rhythm. Success isn't about forcing our way through obstacles, but finding flow within changing circumstances. Sometimes the beat speeds up, sometimes it slows down. Our job isn't to control the music, but to adapt our movements to whatever plays. Now, I want to be clear about something. This approach to recovery isn't about accepting injustice or adapting to broken systems. The women in both examples were actively challenging systemic barriers while simultaneously protecting their well being. This is about sustainability in the fight because burnout serves no one, especially not the causes we care about most. What strikes me most about Kimberly's wisdom is how it reframes softness not as weakness, but as strategy. In a world that often glorifies grinding ourselves down to dust, choosing recovery becomes a revolutionary act. It's saying, my well being matters, my sustainability matters, my joy matters. And here's the beautiful paradox: when we prioritize recovery, we actually become more effective in everything else we do. The entrepreneurs who built rest into their business models created more sustainable companies. The professionals who set boundaries at work became more powerful advocates for themselves and others. I'm reminded of something Kimberly said that stopped me in my tracks. Softness isn't weakness, baby. Softness is strategy. It's your glow up superpower. For so many of us, especially high achieving women who have been conditioned to be strong at all costs, this represents a profound paradigm shift. We've been taught that rest is lazy, that boundaries are selfish, that vulnerability is dangerous. We've internalized the belief that we must be twice as good to get half as far. But what if that narrative itself is what's holding us back? What if our true power lies not in pushing through pain, but in honoring our need for recovery? I think about the generations of women before us who didn't have the luxury of rest, who couldn't set boundaries because their very survival depended on being available, accommodating, strong beyond measure. They did what they had to do, but their sacrifice wasn't meant to be our sentence. They endured so we could eventually thrive. So today I challenge you to revolutionize your relationship with recovery, not as something you do when you're broken, but as something you practice until it becomes your most natural state of being. Write yourself that permission slip, not just on paper, but in your heart. I give myself permission to rest even when my inbox is overflowing. I give myself permission to say no without explanation. I give myself permission to prioritize joy. Because here's the truth: in a world designed to extract every ounce of your energy, choosing recovery is not just self preservation, it's an act of resistance. It declares that you are more than what you produce. It asserts that your worth is not measured by your output. It proclaims that your humanity is non negotiable. The next time life knocks you off balance, and it will, I want you to remember that you've been practicing for this moment. That recovery is not something you scramble to figure out in crisis, but a dance you've been perfecting all along. And in that moment, as you find your footing with grace that surprised even yourself, I want you to feel the power of what Kimberly taught us: that when recovery becomes second nature, resilience becomes your superpower. Now go dance with recovery. The world needs your sustainable brilliance far more than it needs your burnout.